Welcome to the Supreme Court Podcast. All opinions expressed in this podcast do not reflect the views of the Supreme Court. For clarity, the text of the decision prevails.
If there is one person who has the authority to speak about life inside Philippine jails and why decongestion matters, it is Dr. Raymond Narag. He lived through overcrowding and long years of waiting, enduring nearly 7 years of incarceration from 1995 to 2002 after being wrongly accused of murder, before finally being acquitted, finding his road to freedom. Now 51 years old and an associate professor at the School of Justice and Public Safety in Southern Illinois University, he is currently the head consultant of Prisoners Enhancement and Support Organization Incorporated, or PRESO. PRESO is a dynamic organization that addresses the issues, concerns, and challenges affecting the dignity of persons deprived of liberty, or PDLs, in the country, whose mission is to empower correctional volunteers, workers, and other stakeholders, including former PDLs, advocate and undertake transformative measures, programs, and services based on the principles of restorative justice. Dr. Narag's story anchors the goals of the National Decongestion Summit in lived reality. His years in prison illustrate how congestion, case delays, and systematic inefficiencies do not merely overcrowd facilities, but also perpetrate injustice within the system. How does a person's journey through wrongful conviction and incarceration shape his or her concept of justice? What lessons can one with lived experience of injustice teach about justice? What key measures must be put in place in order to prevent prolonged or unjust detention? Hi, I'm Attorney Mike Navalio, Supreme Court Chief Communications Officer. It's the 23rd of January 2026, and today we talk about the struggles of life in incarceration and the challenge of rebuilding one's life afterward. Joining us is Dr. Raymond Narag, Associate Professor at the School of Justice and Public Safety in Southern Illinois University. A person restored of liberty, he is currently the head consultant of Prisoners Enhancement and Support Organization Incorporated, or PRESO. He is also one of the moderators at the Second National Decongestion Summit in Manila. Hi, Dr. Narag. Welcome to the Supreme Court PH Podcast.
Good day, Mike, and all your listeners and the audience of this very moving podcast that we have.
Thank you for agreeing to our invitation despite the short notice. For the benefit of our listeners, Dr. Narag, who are not familiar with your story, can you briefly tell us what happened? How were you incarcerated? And how old are you at that time?
Okay, yeah, it has been a long time ago, Mike. It's part of my previous life, so to speak. It happened in 1995. I was only 20 years old during the time, a fresh graduate from the University of the Philippines, Diliman National College of Public Administration and Governance, or NCPAG. So it stemmed from a fraternity-related case. There was this incident at the Beach House Canteen on December 8, 1994, and a group of men were having lunch and they were attacked suddenly by another group of men wearing lead pipes and baseball bats, but they were also covered with masks on their faces. And the pandemonium happened very quickly. Victims were running for their dear lives. Unfortunately, one of the victims natisod siya dun sa the root of a the protected root of a tree, yung mga Nara tree doon, that he was ganged up by the attackers. And unfortunately, he died afterwards. But the police officers responded and they asked all the victims, sino ang pumalo sa inyo, sino ang umatak sa inyo. And all were one in saying that hindi po namin nakita. Una, dahil ang bilis na mangyari, we were running for our dear lives and nakamaskara po yung tumira. Even when they were brought to the infirmary, ganoon din, tanong ng doktor, sino po ang umatake sa inyo? And the victims were all one in saying na sila ay hindi nila napansin, hindi nila nakita, hindi nila na-identify. But 2 days after the victim died, he was even my friend at NCPAG during the time. His name was Dennis Venturina, also a scholar ng bayan. And pumunta sila sa NBI, yung mga victims, yung mga witnesses supposedly. And ang sabi nila, in the heat of the attack, they were parrying the blows. while parrying the blows, the mask fell off.
Mhm.
And when the masks fell off, me and 11 others were identified supposedly as the attackers. So because of that, I was charged with 1 count of murder, 2 counts of frustrated murder, and 3 counts of attempted murder. So I was actually a victim of false accusation and police misconduct during that time, NBI misconduct.
So they wanted to solve the case. And
They wanted to solve the
identified you?
case very quickly, and then they came up with these false narratives that I was in the scene of crime, which I was not.
Mhm.
So
What happened in court? What did the evidence show?
yeah, so we voluntarily surrendered. After 9 months, lumaya yung mga kasama ko. 2 kami na deny ang bail. Kasi kami na daw ang pumalo dun sa namatay mismo. So
Based on the testimony of the
during
witnesses.
the time. Oo. So sabi daw ay kami ay liable for murder, yung mga kasama namin liable for frustrated and attempted murder. At dahil hindi na-establish ang conspiracy at that time, sila ay pwedeng lumaya, kami naman ay hindi. But then the judge who made the bail decision was eventually booted out because of corruption cases. So nagkaroon ng bagong judge. Si Justice Jose Catral Mendoza was the judge who handled our case. And after 6 years, 9 months, and 4 days, nagkaroon ng mga hearing. And I was able to establish na wala ako sa scene of the crime, may witnesses ako. And eventually, I was found innocent. Not guilty.
What happened to that claim na nakita yung mukha mo, na natanggal daw yung mask? What did the court say about that?
That it's not corroborated. Isa lang ang nag-testify sa akin na gano'n, and there were holes sa kanyang testimony kasi tumakbo na daw siya ng lumayo, tapos tsaka pa siya sumilip at tsaka siya nakita yung mukha ko, which is very, very unnatural course of events, sabi ng judge during the time.
And you said that you were able to establish that you were somewhere else at the time.
Yes, so I have witnesses. I was at the LBC. I was mailing letters for Ma'am Iye, Coronel Ferrer,
Yes.
peace process. Mayroon kaming research on the peace process. Ako yung kanyang research assistant. Inutusan niya ako nung araw na yon. So I was able to testify, yung witness ko, yung LBC Desman, si Ma'am Iye, all saying that I was miles and miles away from the scene of the crime. So I had a very effective alibi. All right. So eventually the court dismissed the case against me. So I was acquitted.
Unfortunately, it took 6 years.
It took 6 years, 9 months, and 4 days to be exact at the RTC level. So I was a pre-trial detainee. Yeah.
So you encountered Dr. Narag, the criminal justice system, not as a scholar, studying it from the outside, but someone with a lived experience. You were condemned by it. Condemned in the sense that you experienced detention for 6 years, although you were eventually acquitted. So how did that experience of surviving incarceration shape the way you came to view crime, punishment, and the idea of justice itself?
That's right. Nung nasa UP ako, alam mo, I have a very bright future. I was about to graduate cum laude. I want to go to law school. Naglalae review na ako noon. Naka-shades nga ako palagi kasi my future is so bright. Yun yung biro namin right? And then, of course, this case happened. It's really shock, yung parents ko, yung mga kapatid ko, they look up so highly of me, right? Pero nung nandun ako sa loob ng jail, napansin ko na, ay, ang dami palang nangangailangan ng tulong. And I'm a scholar ng bayan. Aktivista ako sa UP sabi ko, ang kulungan nito magiging 4 na kwadro ng aking pag-aaral. So nag-interview ako ng mga inmates, tinulungan ko sila sa mga kaso nila. Tapos nakita ko na ang daming mga kapwa ko PDLs na hindi marunong magbasa at magsulat. Nagkaroon kami ng eskwelahan, yung alternative learning system doon. Yun yung first ALS na nangyari sa mga jails nationwide na naging basis din ng ALS moving forward. Tapos nagparalegal ako doon, Mike. So may mga inmates lalapit sa akin, Raymond, paliwanag mo tong kaso ko. So pinag-aralan ko ang the criminal procedure, rights of the accused, different ways of release. Yung mga basic lang para maipaliwanag ko ano yung arraignment, ano yung magpipli ng guilty or not guilty, ano yung table of penalties. Yan. And eventually, on my 4th year of stay, naging mayor de mayores ako sa loob. So, inelect ako ng mga kapwa inmates ko ng Sputnik, Commando, Bahala, Batang City Jail na mamuno kasi ang daming gangs dyan eh. May drugs sa loob during that time. Nag-mediate kami ng conflict dahil nag-aaway-aaway sila. And doon ko nakita na itong mga tao nangangailangan lang ng tulong. And kung natulungan mo sila, it becomes the pathway for their reformation. At yun ang nakatulong sa akin kasi habang nakikita ko yung mga kapwa ko Fidel na hindi marunong magbasa at magsulat, pero naturuan namin sila. At nung lumaya, susulat sa akin, Raymond, nandito na ako ngayon. Doon ko na-realize na, siguro may dahilan kung bakit ako nandito sa loob ng kulungan. And so yun yung naging redemption ko na kahit paano, grow where you are planted. Kahit saan ka itapon, kahit sa napakasiksikang lugar ng Quezon City Jail during the time, kung tunay kang ginto, kikinang at kikinang ka.
I'm curious how you survived that because it seems that there are a lot of temptations now, a lot of bad influences. In fact, in one of your talks, I remember you saying that it could be a breeding ground. If you're a good person, you could, be influenced by a life of crime if you're incarcerated at the wrong situation. So, how did you survive that?
Well, unang-una, mayroon akong strong sense of right or wrong. Ang sabi ko sa akin sarili, pumasok akong malinis, lalabas akong malinis. Alright? Tinuruan ako ng nanay at tatay ko kung anong tama, mali. Dapat panindigan ko yan kahit saan lupalop ako ng mundo. Pero more important is yung support system. Mayroong isang madre, si Sister Auxilium Saile ng Religious of the Virgin Mary. Sumulangit nawa, namatay na siya nung pandemic. At ang sabi niya sa akin, Raymond, to whom God had given much, much is expected. Sabi ko sa kanya, Sister, ano naman ang ine-expect ni God sa akin? Nakukulong na. Hindi, basta, mayroong dahilan dyan. So, si Sister Kulit, nagpapadala kasi ng pagkain sa loob eh. Ang tawag namin palakad. Right? Yung mga inmates, ang gagaling niya, Sister, bigyan mo ko. Yung pala, nakakuha na. Na-observe ko yun. So, sabi ko, Sister, magkaroon tayo ng konting sistema. So, ang gagawin natin, ililista natin yung pangalan na bibigyan mo. At pag natanggap na nila, i-check ko. At tatanungin natin yung pangalan nila ulit kung tatanggap sila ulit. Di na-check namin yung abuses ng mga PDLs. Hindi na sila sumusobra. Pero, doon nila nakita, yung kasama ni Sister, sino yun? Marunong magbasa at magsulat. So nalaman nila na marunong ako magbasa at magsulat. Tapos, isang araw, mga 3 buwan ng aking pagkakulong, may lumapit na inmate. Kuya Raymond, pwede ba kong sulatan yung nanay at tatay ko? Bakit? Kasi 3 buwan na ako rito wala pa akong dalaw. Ganun ba? Anong nangyari? Nakasuhan ako ng tawag dito, shoplifting, tsinelas sa SM. Ganun ba? Okay. Di sulat. Yung palaran ng Yossi, yun ang ginamit namin. Dear tatay at nanay, puntahan mo niyo ako dito. Puntahan niyo ang judge ko, puntahan niyo ang PAW lawyer ko kasi matagal na akong nakakulong dito. Di ko pa sila nakikita. Okay, wala pa akong arena. So pag dumating na yung mga kapatid ko, kasi estudyante sila sa UP during that time, sila na rin yung maghuhulog dun sa papel, magbabayad ng sobre, magbabayad ng stamps. After a few days, dumating yung nanay, tatay, ang daming bayong, pagkain. Anak, dito ko pala, di mo namin alam. Ang daming pagkain. Ugaling Pilipino, pasalamat kay Raymond, kalahati. Ang gagawin ko naman, i-share ko yun sa mga kapwa inmate na wala ring dalaw. Tapos, after a few days, lumaya. Kasi yun pala, pwede mo nang i-plead bargain kasi 1 month lang, naka 6 months, naka 3 months na siya. So, laya na siya agad. Pero bago siya lumaya, in-announce siya sa mga kaselda namin na ang nagpalaya sa kanya, si Raymond Narag. Kasi yun lang na alam niya. Lumapit siya sa akin.
So, naging hero ka pa pala doon.
The following day, 3 na yung nakapila. So, anong kaso mo? Kuya Raymond, baka pwede mong sulatan ng asawa ko. Bakit? Binugbog ko siya. Hihingin ako ng tawad. Ano bang nangyari? Kasi sa akin. Mamaya, yung asawa. Sino nagsulat nito? Niloko mo na naman ako. Hindi, si Raymond Narag. Ako, pupunta sila sa akin. Totoo ba itong sinusulat ng asawa ko? Nag-family counseling ako. So, ano mangyari? So, yung babae, sabi niya, Kuya Raymond, iurong ko na yung charges laban sa asawa ko. Affidavit of desistance. So, susulatan ko ngayon si Judge. Dear Judge, inuurong ko na po yung kaso laban sa asawa ko. Pero pag bubugbugin niya po ako ulit, siya po ay ipapakulong ko ulit. Kaya mga ganun mga conditions. So doon ko na-realize na yung mga inmates, right, kapag sila'y lumalapit sa'yo at pinapakinggan mo sila, eventually, yun yung magiging start ng reformation din nila tulad ng sinabi ko kanina. At yun yung naging, may dahilan siguro bakit ako nakulong. And that's how I was able to overcome those prolonged sleepless detention that I encountered.
It seems like ang dami mong ginawa sa loob ng piitan, no? Was there ever a point though when you felt na parang hindi ko na kaya? When you felt like losing it, but what kept you going?
Yes, definitely. This was on my 4th year of stay. Laging napopostpone ng hearing namin. 6 months na walang nangyari. Kasi mayroon kaming document na hindi ma-produce. May ilang mga lawyers na nag-withdraw, napagod na. May mga dalaw na kumbaga mahal namin sa buhay na hindi na nagpapakita, ganyan. Baon na sa utang ang nanay at tatay ko. Yung tatay ko hindi mo promote dahil kumbaga kung hindi daw niya madisiplina ang kanyang anak, how much more na madidisiplina niya ang mga teachers niya kasi principal dapat siya, ganyan. So, alam mo yun, nagsa-self-pity ako, tapos yung girlfriend ko, sabi ko, kalibutan mo na ako. Wala ka lang mapapala sa akin. Pero paglaya ko, ikaw pa rin naman ang aking hanap. Alam mo yun, drama-drama, ganyan. To the point na isang gabi, hindi ako makatulog. Tapos parang, doon ako sa maliit na kubol ko, yung parang yung walls, inipit ako. Tapos pupunta ako doon sa buyon, sa CR, para magbawas. Nung nagbawas, parang nahulog ako. And then, Raymond, mamamatay ka. Raymond, papatayin ka nila. Raymond, ikaw mamamatay tao. Ikaw may death penalty pa during that time. So kinakabahan ako. Wala akong kasalanan. So yun yung spiritual attack. Baka siguro 4 days yun na hindi ako nakatulog, tulala, paranoid. Pag dumating yung dalaw ko, yung mga kapatid ko, hindi mo yan kapatid. Kanyan, kalaban yan. Huwag kang makipagkwento dyan. Ikikwento nila sa kabila, sa kalaban mo yung, alam mo yan, yung ganong mentality. Na sabi ko, Lord, gusto ko nang magpahinga na hindi na magising. Kasi Mike, before ako makulong, dahil sa UP at activismo, di ako naniwala sa Diyos. Kung naging atheist ako sabi ni Karl Marx, religion is the opiate of the mind, it's an instrument of oppression. Totoo naman, right? Pero eventually, nung nasa loob ako ng kulungan, nagbasa ako ng Bible, nag-lead ako ng study groups, nagtayo pa kami ng Kristo okay sa amin, KOSA. Alright? And dun ko ulit sinurrender yung aking sarili sa Kanya. Lord, take it away. So yun, dun ko na-overcome. At nung sinabi ng Panginoon sa akin sa panaginip ko na yun, huwag kang mag-alala. Kasi ang tanong ko, paano kung ma-death penalty ako? Takot na takot ako dyan. Ang mental mind ko, sabihin na, hindi, huwag kang mag-alala. Mayroon pa namang Supreme Court. Paano kung ang Supreme Court, i-convict ka? Ang laban ng mind ko is, hindi, mayroon pa naman siguro president na mag-pardon. Pero paano kung, pag ganun, natakot na ako kasi ibig sabihin hindi na kaya. Pero nung I surrender myself to the Lord, sabi sa akin is, huwag kang mag-alala. Kasi pagdating sa akin, alam ko ang totoo at wala kang kasalanan. So okay pala, kahit may death penalty ako, absolto pala ako sa langit. And because of that assurance na whatever happens, I am good at His hands, ayun, bam, parang nakatulog ako ulit. And then dun, lalo kong kinumit yung aking sarili to service. Sabi ko, Lord, maglilingkod ako sa iyo habang ako'y nakakulong. Magparalegal, magturo, maging peace advocate sa loob, pigilan yung mga kapwa ko inmate na gumamit ng droga, etc. At Lord, sabi ko sa Kanya, pag lumaya ako, I'll be your spokesperson for the downtrodden and the forgotten. And through the word, noong February 28, 2002, after 6 years, 9 months, and 4 days, He granted my freedom. Nung nakulong ako, Mike, 3 nawala sa akin. Nawala yung aking honors sa UP, binigay ng UP. Nawala yung aking freedom, of course, nakulong ako. And nawala yung aking love life. Nung lumaya ko, I claimed them all back.
Wow. Bumalik yung that
Bumalik.
ex.
Binigay ng UP yung honor ko.
Mm.
Of course, I get my freedom. That yung girlfriend ko, na
Bumalik
pinangakuan ko
sa'yo.
na pag lumaya ko, ikaw ang babaeng una kong hanapin. Naghihintay lang naman pala sa akin. Yeah. So,
But did your concept of justice at any point nagbago ba? At any point in journey? Kasi inisip ko, aktivista ka sa UP. So, may sarili kang konsepto ng hustisya. Tapos nung nakulong ka and you feel na this is unfair, hindi ko naman ginawa. Nagbago ba yung view mo ng hustisya? Hanggang sa nakalaya ka at lagpasan mo yon, nagbago ba uli yung view mo ng hustisya?
tama. There are stages, all right? Nung UP student ako, social justice right? Kailangan may free education, mayroong free access to medicines, access to justice, right? Kasi alam naman natin yung structure of violence. So yun yung aking advocacy sa loob ng pulungan na dapat i-empower yung mga inmates, etc. But on a personal level, I felt that I was wrong, Mike. Kasi wala akong kasalanan Kaya nung una, galit na galit ako. Paglaya ko, habulin ko yung tao na nagpakulong sa akin. Lintik lang ako lang ganti. Right? But then I realized, ang daming mga estudyante na nakukulong. Hindi lang yung sa frat mismo, yung nagtapon ng granada sa TIP, nag-assault ako. Yung pugot ulo ng ng Tao Gama, mga kasama ko sa kwan. Tapos yung mga UP students na Alpha Phi Beta, yung mga ganon, iniipon. So nagkaroon kami ng fraternity cell. Tapos
mga may frat.
and then na-realize ko na, biktima kami lahat dito at aggressors din at the same time. Alright? Na yung nagturo sa akin, biktima din, and at the same time aggressor. Ako rin naging biktima and naging aggressor din ako one point in time. So sabi ko, natanggap ko na kaya ako nakakulong, it is because I once held a paddle. Right? Kahit na yung pinalo ko hindi namatay, pero dahil pumalo ako at may namatay doon, I was part of the collective guilt ng fraternity system that led to the death of someone else. So yun yung naging sinabi ko na I deserved the punishment. And nung lumaya ako, yun yung naging advocacy ko, Mike. Naging ambassadors for peace ako ni President Dodong Namenso. At pinuntahan ko lahat mga fratmen. Yung nagpakulong sa akin, sabi ko, offer ko ang arms of reconciliation. Pukpukin nyo na ng pukpukin ang ulo ko. Wala na kayong mapapala sa akin kasi sira na buhay ko. I'm just trying to restart my life back. Alright? And gusto ko na magkaroon tayo ng peace. Kasi kung hindi, we are just perpetuating the violence we inflict on each other. So dun, napatawad ko, yung gusto ko na mag-revenge, nawala yun, Mike. Nawala. Oo. And then of course, nung lumayan ako, I advocated for a bigger justice reform. Oo. Kasi ang dami pang Raymond na walang kasalanan na makukulong. Ang dami pa rin mga tao na biktima ng police deviance, prolonged trial detention, yung corruption sa ating justice system na overcrowded, etc. And I do believe we deserve better as a nation. Right? And so yun yung aking sense of justice pa sa ngayon na it's more about collective justice, it's about social justice that everybody should benefit from.
And after your acquittal, no, you went into the academe, karoon ka ng mga pag-aaral, and public discourse as well. You're very active, no, in discussing your advocacy on prison reform. In your experience, which is more difficult? Reclaiming your identity as a free citizen or establishing yourself, your credibility as a scholar whose work is shaped by lived experience? I mean, marami siguro magsasabi, kaya ka lang naman nag-advocate ng prison reform dahil nakulong ka. Pero on the other hand, that gives you credibility kasi alam mo yung sinasabi mo. So, saan ka mas nahirapan? Yung pag-regain mo na malaya na uli ako as Raymond Narag and I'm free to do what I want.
Actually, magandang tanong na yan. First time kong matanong sa ganyang tanong, but I do believe mayroon na mga circumstances sa aking life na basically touches on that. Bakit ko nasabi? Nagla-lecture ako minsan. At sabi ng isang participant, Sir, alam mo, ang gaganda ng mga theory mo Pero hindi ako naniwala dahil sa mga theory ng criminal justice ang sinasabi mo. Naniwala ako sa iyo kasi galing ka sa loob ng kulungan at may credibility ka. Alright? Ganun po ba? Pagkatapos niya, may isang lumapit sa akin. Sir, alam mo, ang dami na akong narinig ng mga tao galing sa loob at narinig ko na yung kwento na yan eh. Pero nung diniscuss mo ang theory, napag-connect ko ang dots. At lalong lumawak ang aking understanding. So, ibig sabihin, different type of audience relate on me. Either I could relate on them because I lived through the experience ng pagka-aresto sa police, pagkakulong sa napaka-siksikan na kulungan, napakatagal na takbo ng hustisya, and all the attendant violence. Pero at the same time, nung lumaya ko, na-impose ako sa criminological theories. Why do people commit crime? What's the best way to address criminal behavior? Ano ang relationship ng individual, societal, and cultural variables into the commission of crimes? At bakit kahit na ikaw ay mabuting tao, kung ikaw ay nasa masamang environment, nagiging masama ka? And because of this, yung mga individual experiences ko, nabibigyan ko ng abstract explanation.
Right.
So it took a while for me to establish myself as a reputable scholar. Kasi syempre mahirap yan eh, di ba? Kinakailangan mo mag-aral, may credentials ka, may master's, may PhD. Pero nung nagawa ko yun, mas lalo akong kapanipaniwala kasi mayroon akong mga examples that came from lived experiences na hindi lang siya abstract. Kaya pag nag-present ako ng mga basic experiences na disparate at the empirical level, pero pag lagyan mo ng theory, na pagko-connect mo ng dots, nabibigyan mo kung ano yung cause, ano yung consequence, kaya mas lalong nagiging policy-oriented yung mga recommendations mo. At hindi mo nako-confuse kung ano yung problema sa ugat ng problema. So yun yung naging magandang idinulot ng pagkakulong ko, at the same time, pagiging scholar ko.
So nakatulong ba sa'yo na after mong lumaya, para nagkaroon ka ng pagkakataon na aralin, kumbaga, kung anong nangyari sa'yo? Nakatulong ba siya in making you whole again?
Definitely, Mike. Wow, that's a very good question. Kasi nung lumaya, nung nasa loob ako ng kulungan, nandun ako eh. Involved ako masyado eh. Pag kinakain mo yung rancho, hirap na hirap mong lunukin eh. Right? Pero nung lumaya na ako, and I'm so far removed from the experience, at na-experience ko na ang buhay na ganito, pero pag binabalikan ko siya, right? I have the chance to relive it. I am able to describe it in more detail, but using now more sophisticated tools of analysis. Na hindi na lang galit, but rather more redemptive in nature. So yun yung kagandahan nun, Mike, eh, na tutukan, na babalikan ko siya, na wala na yung galit, pero at the same time, na-transform ko yung narrative into something na, hey, ito yung buhay namin, you dehumanize us, pero if you don't do anything, you are also dehumanized, but because you continue our dehumanization. Right? Yung kay pedagogy of the oppressed language, yun eh, the dehumanization. So, sa mga articles ko, yun ang aking approach. Na may may lambing, pero mayroong bigat na dapat dadalhin, na hindi ka dapat babalik sa dati mong pangunawa, kundi mayayanig ka, and you have to do something. Parang gano'n.
Wow, that's very deep. Curious na ako, what is the most misunderstood aspect of wrongful convictions? Kasi now that you've studied it, I'm sure many people have misconceptions about wrongful convictions. No? So what's the most misunderstood aspect of it that the public probably will not understand or they fail to grasp?
Totoo yan. Kasi hanggang ngayon, kahit na nakulong ako ng 7 taon at acquitted, ang tanong pa rin sa akin kung hindi ikaw, sino? Hindi mo maituro, ibig sabihin may kinalaman ka. So ibig sabihin may kasalanan ka din. Hanggang ngayon, dala-dala ko
so
yan.
may nagdududa pa rin kung guilty ka o hindi.
Ay, ito, nagle-lecture ako, tapos biglang magsabi, paano mo paniwala yan? Nakulong yan dati. Alright? So stigma pa rin.
Yes.
Alright? So, well, ganun naman talaga ang lipunang Pilipino, at hindi lang namang lipunang Pilipino. Kahit saang lipunan, right? Labeling is a very powerful organizer. Ang tawag natin dyan yung perceptual shorthand. Kasi you have very limited data, hindi mo alam. So ano yung data na lumulutang, yun na lang yung initial impression mo, ile-label mo, at yun na yung magiging natural response mo sa behavior na yan. Right? Normal yan right? So, para sa akin, dito papasok yung secondary story, and primary story. All right? We have to go beyond what we see and what we observe, look deeper, and try to be more discerning. Bakit nangyari to? Kasi kung hindi, everybody will be stigmatized. Oo. Everybody will be labeled. Lalong-lalo na yung mga galing sa loob ng kulungan.
At gano'ng kalaking problem in your advocacy yung stigma against persons deprived of liberty? Kasi madalas pag sinabi, nakakulong yan dati, sabi mo nga, hindi natin papaniwalaan. Or bakit natin sila kakaawaan? Or bakit natin sila kailangan tulungan? So how big of a problem is that in your
It's
advocacy?
very big.
And how do you deal with that?
It's very big. So for example, yung mga bail namin, releases. So we bail out, lorries offenders.
And this is for Preso, no?
For
For
Preso
the benefit
Foundation.
of our
Yeah.
audience.
Tapos pag lumaya na sila, hanapan namin sila ng trabaho, hanapan namin sila ng matutuluyan, hanapan namin sila ng paglalagyan, right? It's so hard to find a job, right? And so, kinakailangan very patient ka na magpaliwanag sa community. And then, kinakailangan sabihin mo dun sa mga project recipients mo na, hey, if you are doing this, you are not only doing this for yourself. You're doing this for all others similarly situated as yours. Kasi pag nagsimula kang maging maganda, it creates that label na maganda itong programa na ito. You provide the way for others to follow. So yun yung advocacy namin. Kaya very strong kami sa trust, very strong kami sa integrity. Kasi kung anong ginagawa ng isa, ilalabel yan sa similarly situated individuals. Alright? Kasi pag isa pumalpak, wala na. Binigyan nga namin yan right? The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. Right? Ganun yung sinasabi nila sa amin So nalalabel kami. So yeah, it's a very, very difficult process. Of course, as much as we want to tell people, hey, trust us because this works, we also have to make sure that our program works. So it creates confidence and it delabels, it removes the stigma for future participants.
And you mentioned Preso, no? It's Prisoners Enhancement and Support Organization. Tell us more about it. Para saan ba yung Preso? Saan ang galing yung idea ng Preso Foundation?
Alright, yung Preso Foundation, 1995 pa yan, Mike. Inmate pa lang ako. Mayroon na yan. At nagsimula yan sa Quezon City Jail. At ang gusto lang naman nila is provide services to persons while they are inside. Food, clothing, medicines. So it's a stopgap measure habang ikaw ay nasa loob. Kumbaga, critical needs provisions. Pero napansin ko, itong inmate ako, sabi ko, kahit bigyan mo yan ng pagkain, ng damit, ng tsinelas, kung hindi mo naman sinusustain, minsan yung tulong mo, nakakasama pa. Kasi mayroon ako mga kaselda nun, iniipon nila yung tsinelas at saka shampoo, tapos ibebenta, tapos gagamitin pambili ng shampoo sa loob Kasi nga walang value formation, nakasama, and at the same time, walang assistance pag lumaya. So sabi namin, let's do it more holistically. Alright? So ang tawag namin dito is yung parang individualized treatment and more of community defense mechanism. Na mag-iipon tayo ng pera sa komunidad, right? Para yung mga tao na ito na mapupunta sa loob ng kulungan, very harmful ang kulungan kasi, para hindi sila ma-expose sa criminogenic risk sa loob ng kulungan, palayain mo na sila agad. Total ang bail, matalo manalo, babalik sa tao na nagbigay ng piyansa. Alright? So, palayain namin sila, pero hindi dapat doon nagtatapos. Una, dapat tulungan mo sa korte kasi maghihiring yan dahil kung hindi mo tulungan at di nagpakita, jump bail. Hindi namin nakukuha ang pera namin. So, sinusundo pa namin yan sa bahay, binibigyan namin yan ng transportation, sinasamahan namin kay judge para si judge, nakita niya sa kami na, hey judge, kami yung nagpiyansa, nandito yung tao, para continuous. Pero at the same time, hanapan pa namin ng trabaho, hanapan namin ng pabahay. Kung mayroong mga tagapakinig dyan na gusto nilang tumulong, mayroon kaming community bail bond fund na yun ay communal fund namin. Yun ay forever fund. At yan ay gagamitin namin sa mga nagpiyansa. Pag bumalik yung pera, gagamitin na naman namin sa iba hanggang sa paikot-ikot lang namin. Alright, so yun po yung Preso Foundation Incorporated and its Community Bail Bond Program.
So it's like a really a holistic approach, no?
That's
Hindi
right.
lang, kailangan sustainable kumbaga, yung
That's
pagtulong. So, incidentally, yung usapan natin, no, is taking place on the sidelines nitong National Decongestion Summit, and kakatapos nga lang ng session ninyo, Dr. Narag. So, thank you for the time with us. So, based on your experience, how do prison congestion, prolonged detention, and case delays affect not just the conditions inside jails, but the possibility of achieving justice itself?
Oh my God, that's a very good question, Mike. All right. And nabanggit mo yung congestion, ano? So, yung consequences muna. Pero mamaya titignan natin yung causes. Yung congestion consequences, ang daming, kumbaga, negative consequences. It leads to overcrowding. Ang overcrowding rate natin pumapalo ng 250%. Noon, umabot pa ng 300, 600%. So at least ganyan 250% na lang. Kapag overcrowded, yung mga tao sa loob ng jail, kanyan restless Madaan ka, may tubig dyan, may natutulog, tapos nasagi yung tubig, o sasagi sa may splash sa mukha. Riot na yan right? So it leads to violence. Tapos, siyempre, sakit, right? Tuberculosis, madaling mag-spread. So yung physical toll niya sa mga inmates, mahirap. But not only the inmates, pati sa mga personnel, right? Mga personnel, nagkakasakit din, overwork, right? And at the same time, mental health. Kaya mataas ang job turnover sa mga kulungan Kaya recruit sila ng recruit kasi maraming nagre-retire, nagre-resign, or ayaw nang magpakita. But aside from that, yung congestion sa loob ng kulungan, it also affects our justice system. Kasi pag congested, minsan hindi madala sa korte, postpone ng hearing. At dahil postpone ng hearing, lalong nagtatagal, lalong nako-congest. Alright? So yun yung mga negative consequences ng congestion. So the solution is not really to build more prisons, but to address the input. Sino ba mga hinuhuli natin? Ideally, dapat hulihin natin yung mga serious offenders, yung mga talagang karumal-dumal. Pero yung mga nagkakarakrus dyan sa palipaligid, yung mga low-risk, first-time drug users na hindi naman menace to the society, dapat yun dinadivert. Right? And then of course, bilisan natin ang takbo ng kaso. Siguro ito yung pinaka magandang i-discuss din ng Supreme Court is how do we really fast-track the disposition of cases? Bakit ang dami-daming postponements? It is because mayroon ding structural, organizational, and cultural. Kulang ang judges, kulang ang fiscal, kulang ang mga facilities. Tapos yung piecemeal hearing, once a month ka mag-hearing or once in 2 months or it's 3 months. Nasa Amerika, hindi ganon. Mag-hearing ka ngayon, bung, 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 tapos. Sa atin hindi Pag ganyan laktawan Right? And then nagiging cultural practice na kasi sa Pilipinas, wag sana magagalit ang mga abogado, pero appearance, ang fees.
Bayad.
May bayad ka, ma-postpone o hindi matuloy ang hearing. So na-incentivize actually ang prolonged trial sa atin. Alright? So dahil dun, it leads to cultural problems. So yung input, madami, yung throughput, mabagal, and then very limited ang output mechanism sa atin. Kakunti ang nagpa-probation, kakunti ang executive clemency. Mike, alam mo ba na mayroong 5 to 10,000 PDLs ngayon sa Bilibid na life sentence dahil sa drugs, naging biktima ng drug war. Na kung sila ay nag-plea bargain sana, nabigyan lang sana sila ng 4 years to 6 years. Pero dahil inilaban nila, nabigyan sila ng life sentence. Kung life sentence yan, 10 years pa lang sila, mayroon pa silang 30 years na bubunuin, matagal pa sila bago lumaya. Kung pwede yung mga nasentensyan ng life sentence sa drugs, baka pwedeng i-commute ang sentence and then palayahin sila through parole supervision na lang. That way, we could decongest our jails and prisons. Otherwise, it will be a very, very dragging, very, very costly situation that we have. Alam mo ba na nagtaas na naman tayo ng budget ng pagkain ng preso from 70 pesos to 100 pesos? Kung yung budget na yun, ibinigay mo na sana sa edukasyon. Do you know that we spend more than twice for an inmate compared to a UP student, Mike?
Really?
Yes! Yes, ganun kamahal ang magpakain ng isang preso. Kasi one day 365 days. Kung 10 years yan sa loob, plus yung gwardiya pa. Ang dami na nating gwardiya sa loob actually. Alright? Kumbaga, sobrang pabigat na kasi nga hindi naman sila productive sa loob. Wala namang factory sa loob para maging self-sustaining ang mga kulungan natin. So it's really a drain. So yun yung nagiging negative consequence ng congestion na pilit na i-overcome nitong summit na ito.
And you mentioned, I think you already mentioned a concrete example, no? Ang concrete measure na pwedeng gawin. And this is all part also of the discussion on diversion, no? As alternative na, kumbaga, alternative means rather than ikulong sila. So makakatipid ka, you also allow them na hindi makulong, no? Pero how do we, kumbaga, look at all these other measures? Anong pinaka-urgent? Anong pinaka-effective, do you think? Ano ang pinaka-cost-effective in terms of looking at alternative solutions?
Oh, okay. Maraming mga yung mga low-hanging fruits, ika nga, right? Ang PNP, na-evaluate sila, depende kung ilan ang nahuhuli nila, ilan ang nako-confiscate nilang droga, ilan ang pera na nakukuha nila mula sa Caracruz, and so on and so forth. And dahil na-incentivize yung arrest, hindi nila nakikita na yung absorptive capacity ng prosecution natin, absorptive capacity ng courts natin, ay hindi angkop dun sa arrest capacity ng police officers natin. Alright? So, very effective nga sila sa mag-arrest, pero nako-congest ang jails, ang dockets ng courts natin. Alright? And so, if there's a way for our police officers to develop alternative performance indicators, that instead of the number of arrests, it should be the number of calls for service being properly handled and supervised. All right? So dito, mayroon ka dapat mechanisms to understand yung calls for service. Ang tawag natin yun, ilan yung, hey sir, puntahan niyo ako dito. Right? Hindi yung ikaw mismo ang lalabas at maghahanap. So yun yung mga mechanisms to evaluate the policing even better.
At meron kang binanggit din, Dr. Narag, na yung kumbaga, yung characteristics nung PDL ang titingnan rather than yung kung gaano kabigat yung crime, di ba?
That's right. Oo. Kasi ngayon, lahat ng mga magagandang batas natin, magandang intention, pero very restrictive ang application. Halimbawa sa probation, right? Dapat 6 years and below. Dapat first-time offense, right? Tapos yung community service law natin, napaka low level offending. Yung ating release on recognizance, ganun din. And even the proposed diversion, 6 years and below and first time offenders. Kung ganun ang gagawin mo, well, kalahati ng mga tao sa jails natin ngayon, 6 years and above. So, kakunti na ang magiging, kumbaga, lambat yung net na makukuha mo, and yung mga isda na malalaki, hindi na muna mahuli. Yung mga malilit lang ang mahuli mo. Parang gano'n, right? So, sa Amerika and ibang bansa, hindi sila sentence-based at hindi sila offense-based. Rather, they look at the offender characteristics. Alright? So, halimbawa si Raymond Narag, right? Ang kaso niya ay murder. 2 counts of frustrated murder and 3 counts of attempted murder. Sa current situation, hindi na ako makapag-bail, hindi ako makapag-diversion, hindi rin ako makapag-probation. Right? Eventually, wala pala akong kasalanan, inosente pala ako, pero nag-suffer ako ng 6 years and 9 months. Right? Pero kung mayroon tayong diversion na based on offender characteristics, so for example, ikaw ba ay galing sa isang matinong pamilya? Ikaw ba ay may pinag-aralan? Ikaw ba ay walang negative influensya ang barkada? Ikaw ba ay nasa magandang komunidad? Ikaw ba ay mayroong trabaho? Ikaw ba ay may stakes to your communities? Ikaw ba ay may asawa at anak? Ikaw ba ay breadwinner? So lahat yan, pwede mong i-measure yan 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, maganda. 1, pangit. 2, sobrang pangit. Right? At kung 0, 0, 0 ka lang, Raymond Narag, valedictorian ng high school, cum laude sa UP. Alam mo yun? So dapat ako, diverted ako habang undergoing trial para hindi masira ang buhay ko. Ngayon, kung convicted na ako, tsaka niyo ako ikukulong. Pero hindi eh. Kinulong niyo ako ng 7 taon, Tapos inakwit niyo ako. Harm sa akin yun. But maswerte kayo, hindi ako naging kriminal habang ako'y nasa loob ng kulungan. Pero paano kung naging baby ama ang dating ko doon? Di naging sakit sa ulo ng lipunan si Raymond Narag. Alright? So yun yung sinasabi ko, Mike, na there are many ways for us to improve our justice system. Let's rationalize it. Minimize the input, fast track the throughput, and maximize the output.
Final question. Why should ordinary people care about PDLs or even PRLs? Sa dinami-dami ng problema sa Pilipinas, bakit yung mga problema ng nakakulong ang poproblemahin ng ordinaryong tao?
Because tayo rin sila. Anybody could be a PRL here in the Philippines. Anybody, right? Anybody could be a PDL. Magkamali ka lang sa highway sa EDSA, may nag-cut sa'yo, nawalan ka ng control sa sarili mo, kuha ka ng baril, bang, bang, bang. You find yourself in the jail or prison. Right? Or minsan, gumagawa ka ng tama, mayroon kang nakalaban, ikaw ang tinamnan. And unfortunately, in the Philippines, if you do the right thing, you are sometimes the odd man out. Right? So, PRLs are individuals who are not necessarily bad. PRLs or PDLs are individuals whom the society thought we could label them as bad. Unfortunately, everybody could be labeled as bad. And also, remember, we are all born criminals. We have all the propensity to be criminals. Because why? That's our fallen nature. Right? Hindi lang natin ina-actualize yung ating criminality. It's because mahal natin ang nanay natin, ang tatay natin, nakakahiya. Mayroon tayong social control. Mayroon tayong self-control. But if that control is broken, everybody is free to commit a crime. And we have these episodic breaks, right? Minsan, nagiinuman ka, right? Nakalimutan mo yung values mo. Merong chicks na lumapit dyan. Yung pala, sex rape na, right? Right? Or minsan, nagkamali ka sa pag-pay ng taxes mo. Uy, i-declare ko lang 5,000. Yung pala, nasilip ka. So, everybody could be in this system. In the Philippines, where there's poverty, where there's lack of education, there's a lack of structural deficits, everybody are strained. And sometimes our coping mechanism is delinquent and criminal, not because we are bad, but because our situation requires it, calls for it. And that's when we fall and then become PDL. But then, of course, nakulong ka, magtatagal ka dyan, 98% of all the people in jail eventually get released. One point or another, 2% lang ang namamatay sa loob ng kulungan. Right? So kahit na sila ay natagal sa loob ng kulungan, eventually babalik at babalik at babalik sila. Now, kung hindi mo yan tinulungan nung nasa loob sila ng kulungan, galit na galit sila, eventually magiging kapitbahay mo rin. And eventually, they will go back to a life of crime. So why do we have to care? Because they are all our neighbors one way or the other. More importantly, it could be us the next time.
Dr. Raymond Narag, thank you so much for this very engaging discussion. Thank you.
As usual, Mike,
Thank you.
I like your hard-hitting questions.
Thank you. And if you wish to learn more about ongoing efforts and stories on jail reform, prison decongestion, and the challenges of reintegration, you may visit the Supreme Court website or the Facebook page of the Justice Sector Coordinating Council and look for press releases and other related materials. Here's Steph Atendido Beltran, Supreme Court Information Officer, for this week's updates.
From the Supreme Court of the Philippines, here's the latest. In a historic moment on Wednesday, justices, judges, court officials, and court personnel from all over the country simultaneously took their new oaths during the Judiciary Nationwide oath-taking. The event marked the launch of two new codes, the Code of Judicial Conduct and Accountability for Justices and Judges, and the Code of Conduct and Accountability for Court Officials and Personnel. With an in-person event at the Supreme Court Session Hall, while other courts joined online. Clerk of Court on-bank Attorney Marifel Lumibao Cuevas administered the new oath of office to the SC justices, while Chief Justice Alexander Esmundo swore in the justices of the tertiary courts and trial judges. He also administered the oath to the court officials and personnel. SC Associate Justice Maria Filomena Singh, chair of the subcommittees for the review of the codes, said that the oath-taking demonstrates the judiciary's firm resolve to render ethical public service in the wake of challenges that have tested our country's moral fiber. Senior Associate Justice Marvic Leonen, who drafted the new oaths of office, said that the new codes reflect the current realities, including rules on the responsible use of social media and artificial intelligence. The SC approved the new codes in November and October 2025. Meanwhile, the SC has found former senatorial candidate Francis Leo Marcos guilty of indirect contempt and ordered him to pay 30,000 pesos for flagrant disrespect of the court's authority. Marcos asked the Supreme Court for injunctive relief against the Commission on Elections ruling, declaring him a nuisance candidate, only to withdraw his senatorial candidacy in the 2025 elections after the court had issued the Temporary Restraining Order, or TRO, he sought. The court en banc, through the ponencia of Associate Justice Singh, held that Marcos abused court processes in violation of Rule 71, Section 3 of the Rules of Court. In another case, the court en banc during its January 21 session denied the motion for reconsideration filed by retired Court of Appeals Associate Justice Isaias Dikdikan, which sought to lift his preventive suspension from the practice of law and restore his pension and retirement benefits. In 2025, the SC formally charged Justice Dikdikan with gross misconduct for his alleged involvement in the murder of attorney Joey Luis B. Wee, who was shot and killed in November 2020 in Cebu City. The SC explained that preventive suspension is necessary because Justice Dikdikan may have possible influence that could obstruct the ongoing criminal and administrative cases against him. During the same session, the SC formally initiated the establishment of the Sharia High Court under the Organic Law for the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARM. In a resolution penned by Associate Justice Japar de Maampao, the court directed the Office of the Court Administrator and the Fiscal and Budget Management Office to prepare and submit the budget and staffing pattern necessary for the operationalization of the Sharia High Court for the next fiscal year. This follows a formal request from the Bangsamoro Transition Authority for the immediate organization of the Sharia High Court. Under the Judiciary Fiscal Autonomy Act, the SC has the discretion to propose the budget and staffing pattern for the operations of the Philippine judiciary, which includes the Sharia Circuit Courts, the Sharia District Courts, and the Sharia High Court. Continuing its efforts to address jail and prison overcrowding, the Justice Sector Coordinating Council, or JSCC, held the Second National Decongestion Summit in Manila from January 21 to 23, 2026. The JSCC is composed of the SC, the Department of Justice, or DOJ, and the Department of the Interior and Local Government, or DILG. The summit focused on long-term structural and legislative reforms to address the problem of congestion in jails and prisons, building on the achievements of the first summit held in December 2023. In his message, Chief Justice Sismundo emphasized that any meaningful solution to decongestion be systematic, collaborative, and sustained, as it is the result of interconnected processes. His fellow JSCC principals, DOJ Acting Secretary Frederick Vida and DILG Undersecretary Rolando Puno, representing DILG Secretary Juanito Victor Remulla, also delivered their remarks. Justice Singh, chair of the JSCC TWG on Processes and Capacity Building and the JSCC Committee for the Summit, delivered the welcome remarks. She also served as moderator in a plenary session on Day 2 regarding the incarcerated or formerly incarcerated people's participation in policymaking, while Associate Justice Raul Villanueva served as speaker in the session on democratizing good conduct time allowance calculation to boost timely releases. On the last day, Senior Associate Justice Marvic Leonen spoke during the plenary session on innovations to increase releases. Speakers on a wide range of topics also included appellate court justices and judges, as well as representatives from law enforcement, prosecution, corrections, the academe, and civil society, both from the Philippines and abroad. Representatives from justice zones across the country and from different agencies attended the summit. Finally, on January 19, Senior Associate Justice Leonan encouraged law students and future lawyers to be better public servants and strive for equitable access to justice at the General Assembly and inauguration of the 2020-2021 bar examinations marker at the University of Makati, or UMAC. UMAC was one of the local testing centers during the 2020-2021 bar exams when Saj Leonan was chair. UMAC School of Law's first batch of graduates also achieved a 100% passing rate during the same bar. Recalling the challenges of holding the bar exams during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, he expressed hope that the historical marker will serve as an inspiration and a reminder of the success that follows sincere, passionate, and collective efforts. You are now up to date with the Philippine Supreme Court. I am Tifa Tendido Beltran, Supreme Court Information Officer.
And that's our podcast this week. Join us again next time for a detailed discussion of select cases decided by the Supreme Court. I'm Attorney Mike Navalio, your Supreme Court Chief Communications Officer. You can catch this podcast as well as previous episodes on the Supreme Court Public Information Office's accounts on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. This podcast episode was produced by the Supreme Court Public Information Office, with Attorney Mike Navalio as overall in charge of production, Attorney Karen Martinez as supervising producer, J. Rempilio, executive producer, Tiff Atendido Beltran, producer, May Sibal, Attorney Ian Aldueso, Attorney Sheila Reyes, and Ramir Simbahon as researchers and writers, Brian Austria, Don Ryan Balza, and Vinny Laraño as audio editors, Lawrence Olaño and Austin Aliscat as video editors, Bea Batong as graphic artist, and Tyke Flores and Jerome Batumalake as web editors.